I think even when not a lot happens in a show, it is very impressive to have just the overall sense of dread throughout a series. Like that's impressive to do. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Episode 6 of the second season of The Old Man is here. Um, it's weird because I feel like these last two episodes have sort of slowed the season down to a pretty much a crawl. Which, truthfully, not a lot happens in this season so far. Like episodes 1, 2, and 3 are all within almost the same time frame. A lot happens within them, so it's not as bad. But this episode and the episode before, episode 4 was a bottle episode, and this one feels like, I won't say a filler because it's not. Things happen, but it is really only two scenes or two things that sort of take place, or two bits that sort of take place in this. We meet up with a character that we have not seen since the end of season 1, Julian Carlson, who was the basically the special ops person that worked for Morgan. He did all the dirty work for Morgan, African American male. He we meet him on the bus stop that he used to go and meet at before. Now, you have to pay attention to the first season and kind of pay attention. But there's a moment in there where he helped out a young lady on crutches. What we see here is a sort of fallout of that after he's sort of left Morgan. He's kind of given up that life. That girl finds him again. It's just kind of wants to say thank you for helping her, that he's been looking for. And they sort of kick it off, and they show subsequently. We kind of bleed into seeing the relationship build, that conversation. It becomes multiple dates, multiple meetings. It's to show that he has left that life of being the hitman and sort of gone into this life to find stuff for him and be him, who he is outside of all of that. Doesn't last long though, because Harper is at his home when he gets home after one of his dates, and is just waiting in his living room. To the point that Harper is saying, like, I need to see what it was that Morgan sent to you before he died. And Julian's feigning ignorance, like I didn't receive an email. I don't know. And he's being pretty, I won't say flippant, but it's in a way that, like, you don't believe that he doesn't have the email. Like, okay, I feel like you got it. It's interesting to know how quickly Harper was able to find Julian, because I think it's important to remember at one point Harper hired Julian to take off Dan. So he sort of had an idea of Morgan didn't have a big circle. Like, he was a part of it. So he knew that there's only so many people he could have sent this to, and it wasn't here, Dan. So it had to have been Morgan. So he sort of defaulted to this piece. Harper then starts, when Julian's denying that he's gotten an email, Harper then starts sort of laying, like how I found you and how others will find you as well, and how the new relationship that you have been budding and having, we wouldn't want anything to happen to her. He's like, are you threatening me? He's like, no, I'm not. Me personally, no, I'm not threatening you. But if it was easy for me to find you, and now that Morgan is dead, who was sort of the person that gave you this protective wall, if it was this easy for me to find you, that means there's cracks that are starting to form within that wall. Those cracks are only going to get larger. And if you want to get that wall solidified, a little bit more protection around you and this young lady, you're going to give me my answer. Otherwise, that wall is going to come down quite fast, and I'm not going to be the person to help you. There'll be nobody there to help you, with Morgan gone. We don't come back to that to the very end. It's fascinating how this is an oddly designed episode, and that we spend the first 15 minutes with Julian and his girl, and then we just ignore that until the very end again. Spend the rest of the time with Dan and Zoe, or Mr. and Mrs. Dixon in this scenario. They go to a London hotel, check in. Dan's being super weird and awkward. asking for a specific room, specific floor, specific even number. Like he's being very judicious in how he's approaching this. He's also having panic attacks, which is understandable, but he's having panic attacks about the death of Emily. And it's just starting to like just eat at him. Um, he knows he needs a clear head for what it is that they have to do, but it's difficult for him. They begin to discuss the meeting that Zoe has the next day with Nina, and they begin to sort of go in on how their relationship or what their relationship is now. She is saying that Zoe is a little hardened and realizes that the gift that she's been given between both Dan and Morgan and what she's sort of given herself um, has made her unable to trust people. And it's a gift and a curse. And she feels like she is now isolating herself from people in a way that she would not have done before, basically doing what Dan sort of used to do. All that said, the next day Zoe goes to the diner to meet with Nina. Um, in her ear is Dan from a bird's eye view. He's watching the whole thing, and they're having a conversation back and forth. There's still a good rapport between the two of them, but it's very cold and different than the way that it was when they first got together. Before, basically, Zoe threatened Dan and sort of turned the tables on him. They've never really recovered or gotten back to that what was before that, and now are kind of almost like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith style of back banter and back and forth. We learn and we see that Nina is not coming. In the back and forth, Zoe does mention a name, Lou Barlow, that sort of takes Dan back a bit, but he carries on, moves on. He then comes down to meet Zoe and says, like, "Hey, this setup is over. We're going to cancel this now." And he says, "Let's call Nina's assistant, Anna, to see if she has a read on where Nina is, because she's not here. That means something has occurred to her. Because she wanted to be here, so something has occurred to her that has stopped her from being able to be here." Anna, Nina's assistant, says, "Like, I don't know where she's at. I don't know what's going on," and kind of dismisses him. And Dan's like, "Cool, cool, 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 cool. I want to meet Anna in person to see if she has a different answer, to see if I can ask this question in a different manner." And so he sets up this elaborate um, machinery that's basically going to long range, like a long range rifle, if you will. That's what she calls it. But it's going to hear the signal, hear the phone call, and pick up the number and location of wherever uh, the other person on the other side of that phone is, Nina is. But first, Dan has to scare the living crap out of Anna to get her to make that call to Nina. He does so. He calmly goes to see her, is like, "Hey," he seems very cordial at first, and then he kind of puts the fear of God into her as she's entering into her hotel room. She gets skittish, very nervous, and hyperventilating, and she goes to make that call. Zoe gets the number, but Zoe also feels a bit bad about what it is that they're doing. And it's not bad that she feels like, "Hey, it sucks that we're doing this." It's more that she can do it, like, and that she doesn't really feel any issues with doing it. She's like, "This was relatively easy to do, and that was the right play, and I would have done the same as well. That makes me feel a bit uneasy about what I've become if this is how simple and how matter of fact this is for us." She so sort of even mentions, like, I you know what it takes to bend people to their knees, to bring people to their knees. I do too. I did it. I did it to you. It's like, "Yeah, you did, and I don't have a problem with it." So she's starting to like this and get into it, and but it is still there is still in the back of her mind, because she's not as removed from it as as Dan is. There is still a bit of a conscious that happens within her. So Dan and Zoe go to the home where that number is traced to, and they find that the door is ajar. Zoe stays outside. Dan goes in, and he finds Nina in a sort of a paralyzed state, like she feels like she can't move, and she doesn't look to be in the best way. Dan then sees a intruder who is trying to rummaging through, looks like a study, uh, and he has a gas mask on, which immediately clicks to Dan what's going on. They start going at it. Dan eventually gets the better of the intruder and kills him. He then brings Nina out and he tells Zoe to stand back, like something's wrong. Nina doesn't look well. There seems to be some type of airborne illness or virus that is going on in that home. I can tell by the gentleman wearing a gas mask, and I probably am infected as well. And he had an antidote on him. It has been subsequently destroyed, so there's no way to take this for her or for me. We're just screwed. Nina's dying, and while Nina's dying, she gives Dan the whereabouts of the USB drive that she was protecting. So Dan puts the gas mask back on, goes back in, grabs that, and then brings it out uh, for Zoe to play on her laptop while standing back, giving her a bit of a space so that he's not directly in contact with her to give her whatever it is that he's got. What we learn is that Pavlovich needs the Dixons to both be dead to gain a complete and total grip of the mineral deposit and control, like, basically minerals of the free world. With Hamzat out, he needs the Dixons also out so that he is in complete and total control. With Nina gone and no antidote, Dan feels that the best way for him to get an antidote is for him to turn himself into Pavlovich. It's a play. I don't know if it's the play, but it's a play because, well, there's no other option. Nobody else is coming to them. He needs to find a way to get to them. Now, I think this is also where we're going to see, when Pavlovich is taken, that Emily is not dead. I think we're going to quickly learn. I just have a feeling. Still can go 50-50, but I just have a feeling that she's not dead. While he is being captured and while they are about absconding upon the building to take Dan, Harper meets with Julian again. Julian's decided to meet with him. And Julian tells Harper that he was out. Like, I'm out. I'm out of the business. I don't want anything to do with this. Julian then says, I got the email and I deleted it because I wanted nothing to do with him. I wanted nothing to do with this. Harper's like, he put what was of his life in your hands. So then Julian's like, well, then I undeleted it. Not sure if that's a word, but that's the word he used. I undeleted it after I couldn't get to sleep. And when I undeleted it, I found this. And he gives them an image, and Harper looks at it, and it's an image of Pavlovich with Harper's ex-wife, Marion, played by Janet McTeer. And so whatever Pavlovich is up to, Dan is about to go into that with the knowledge that, without the knowledge that Marion is backing him. And so Harper doesn't know whatever trap it is on the other side of that. And that is how this episode ends. Again, not a lot that happens. A lot of character study between Dan and Zoe and their relationship and what it is now. And sort of just putting Julian back on the board when he has been gone for episodes now. Hopefully, we start getting into a little bit more of some Dan and we're going to get to Pavlovich. We're going to get to see some of that in this next episode. But I do hope that there's a bit more of a ramp up of some type of action beat. Like, we get it a little bit here in the study, but there's a sense of dread that I will say that the show does quite well throughout the entire thing. But I need something to give me a high or a low. Right now, we're sort of sitting in this point where these two episodes, the Buttle episode, I have no issues with that. I think that's still, like I said, the last episode is probably my favorite episode of the series. This episode, I think, would be better received by me if it didn't come right after the Bottle episode. I think if this was placed somewhere else, but having them back to back, it feels like we've sort of become to a stagnant point of this season, and I need something to kick us back into high gear, even though I love the last episode so much. It's just these two together sort of bring it down a little bit. What did you guys think about this episode of The Old Man Season 2? Go ahead, leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can send an email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.